Allow me to start with Kenyan news today. The FT carried an in-depth special report, and I'll reflect on some of the comments that came from that report. But first of all, I extend my heartfelt condolences to the 15 who are currently feared dead, more than 60 injured, following a fire incident at Gikomba Market. The casualties have been rushed to the Kenyatta National Hospital. I have not been to that market, but I've been to another, which is the fresh fruit and vegetable one near the old railway station, and it's Dickensian, and you can appreciate how quickly a fire could spread. And clearly we're going to have to look a lot more closely at the safety around these offline platforms, as it were. Cabinet Secretary Matiang'i, one thing is for sure, he said, we have contaminated sugar in the country. Now, FT put out a bunch of reports. Let me go through them systematically. The first one was Kenya's bankers warn over Robin Hood tax. This is the proposed Robin Hood tax on transactions over $5,000 equivalent, where the government is going to charge 5 basis points. 5 basis points of excise duty on money transferred by banks, money transfer agencies, and other financial service providers. The Kenya Bankers Association said the proposal tax would have wide-ranging implications on the economy, including through the interbank market and international trade and investment. John Gachora, the managing director of NIC, says if taken at face value, it will not augur well for the markets. I would be opposed to such a tax. And essentially, the problem here is, particularly for wholesale money that comes into our markets because they are free, it becomes very penal. For example, you move your money into your bank in Nairobi, you move it to the central bank account, you purchase your bonds, you come back, you sell those bonds, and you have another 2 movements. So 4 movements. It's going to make it punitive, and I think therefore it was poorly thought out. When you go to the wider economy, the high cost of transactions means traders will minimize activity, which affects liquidity and the attractiveness of the capital market. You will end up informalizing the economy at a time when the government is trying to grow the formal economy and the capital market. Some bankers and analysts speculate that the proposal was a quid pro quo for scrapping a previously mooted plan to increase the upper bands of both corporate tax and personal income tax. I'm quite concerned about this, and but the fact of the matter, it's a nice idea, but the reality is financial services are a high volume and low margin business. It could have an impact on investors and the appetite of international investors for Kenya, and I think it was badly thought out. I'd focused instead on the increase in excise duty from on mobile phone transfers over the weekend, when I said don't kill the golden goose that lays the golden eggs. And I was calling for an immediate reversal of this excise duty increase. It's kindergarten economics, I said. And I was also calling for a lifting of the daily M-Pesa cap, which I said was an artificial number in an age where mobile money transfers are seemingly much more compliant and transparent than banking movements. Now, the FT wrote a lot of articles. I'll start off with this. There was a lot of hype about Silicon Savannah, but a lot of those early startups flamed out, says Grant Brooke, the CEO of Twiga Foods. And I remember wandering around the iHub a few years ago and thinking to myself, everyone here is just trying to win $25,000 or $50,000 from Bill and Melinda Gates. And I got a little bit disillusioned, but I think Grant's right. There's been a bit of a sea change now. People are chasing the opportunity more than the grant. There was, as he said, there was a lot of hype. Now the people who are part of that are ready to build serious companies. And interesting data from that report, according to the World Economic Forum, Kenyans spend on average 47% of their income on food. This makes them extremely vulnerable to food inflation. And basically, Twiga promises to improve the price that farmers get for crops such as potatoes, bananas, and onions, while simultaneously providing urban vendors with a reliable supply of fresh vegetables at a discount. We're creating certainty for farmers. That does the most good. Um, and he's saying the market is fragmented with approximately 130,000 merchants buying vegetables for Nairobi alone. Twiga's platform aggregates orders. Currently, it supplies about 1,500 vendors and creates a marketplace that cuts out layers of intermediaries. So a very, very solid business. They've now gone into the blockchain. They're making loans to the dukas that they're supplying in Nairobi, for example. When I went to pick up Hannah one day, I saw them in action, and it was pretty impressive, I must say. Then talking about things like My Dawa, a digital platform which allows people to get bona fide medicines, referencing Mark Zuckerberg, who described Kenya world leader in mobile money. And then Ken Njoroge of Cellulant, who got this big slug of cash recently, $57 million, says Kenya is 2 to 3 years ahead of other African markets. And most of that is driven by the fact that mobile money and the mobile payments ecosystem is more mature. Customers are educated and regulators are comfortable with it. And that's why it is, as I said in my article, the fastest growing component in our economy. And I wish they hadn't raised the tax 200 basis points. Kenya's president eyes legacy with Big Four plan for economy. It's another article in the FT. Saying stalled projects have been kicked into gear, but problems such as corruption remain. It took only a few weeks for Africa Integris to appreciate how serious President Kenyatta was about his Big Four economic policy agenda after it was announced in December. The US investment house, which builds university accommodation across Africa, has seen its $57 million project to construct a 10,000-bed capacity dormitory block at Kenyatta University on the outskirts of Nairobi stalled. The previous 3 years have been a case of 2 steps forward, 3 steps back as the company navigated its way through the country's labyrinthine bureaucracy, according to Andrea Pizziconi. If you're part of the Big Four, there's definitely a new impetus to get investment deals done, and this is probably the largest affordable housing project in Kenya right now, she says. Says Kenya's attractions for investment are its people, skills, location, and pro-business environment. Talking about universal healthcare, wanting to build 500,000 affordable homes, increase manufacturing share of the economy from about 9% to 15%, and basically looking for support out of the private sector. And Karima Muchoki, the chairwoman of the Kenya Investment Authority, says she has never seen a president more determined to deliver. He can't run for re-election again, so this is his chance to really leave his mark on the country, she said, adding that the policies and structures to implement the Big Four agenda should be in place by the end of July. A Big Four project is essentially a public-private partnership strategy, I said. The government's got absolutely no money. I think that was established. Therefore, this should provide impetus, but fundamentally it's going to require a new model which the government doesn't have much experience in. Muchoki saying Ken Invest has received hundreds of thousands of expressions of interest from foreign investors in the past 3 months. Many Kenyans expect Kenyatta's newly launched war on corruption to provide an early indication of how close he will get to achieving his Big Four goals, and I think it pivots on his anti-corruption drive. Some officials say wastage accounts are well over 10% of the government budget. It's as plain as day that the termite economy, where institutions are being eaten from within, has expanded under this administration and needs to be arrested. And that's what this anti-corruption drive is all about. And then this caught my attention. This is Graham Shaw, who's head of the British Chamber of Commerce. He says, come in with your eyes open. As he described Kenya's unpredictable business environment, investors have to be pretty streetwise to understand what's going on. and that shouldn't be necessary. Next article is Kenya prospers after political foes press reset button. The wonderful thing about Kenya is that it is capitalist and market driven. The vibrancy of the private sector goes all the way from large companies right down to what we call the jua kali, the informal sector. And this is saying that post-election détente has helped the country get back to business, really has so much rested on a single handshake. And that was my piece in March when I wrote about the rapprochement. If you look at the first term, the president worked significantly to ensure that we had the right infrastructure, says Joe Mucheru, Minister for ICT, added substantially to its debt. When the government came in, infrastructure was a problem, power was a problem, water was a problem, roads were a problem, railway and so on. In the second term, his main focus is on people. Martin Kimani, head of Kenya's counter-terrorism center and a confidant of Mr. Kenyatta, rejects criticism that the president has allowed corruption to flourish. He's trying to fight this beast, but he's very aware of how difficult it is, he says. He can't be judge, jury, and executioner, he adds, referring to the separation of powers and the administration's frustration with the judiciary that has often appeared reluctant to convict. Nairobi all shares up 2.53% this year to date. It's 10.7% below its record high set in April. NSE 20 is down 11.15%. ARM said, we once again need to reduce group debt and restructure the balance sheet. And then I saw a subsequent email where they're talking about shareholder loans. Crown Paints passed a resolution tooling the company to lend money or guarantee another party. Have a look at that. This is a photograph of the Commerce Department, Jill Kaplan and Ambassador Godek joining the Minister of Tourism here in Kenya, the CS for Transport and the KQ Chairman and CEO on a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. All about the flights that are soon to be brought into play between Nairobi and New York. A couple more articles. Kenya's energy and transport plans come at a cost. Critics question value for money on some big-ticket projects. Each month, several $1 million is added to the Kenya government's bill for electricity generated by Africa's biggest wind farm located around the blowy shores of Lake Turkana in the north of the country. The only problem, there is no electricity, at least none that anybody can use for now. Turkana is in the north of the country. The 310 megawatt wind farm, which is eventually supposed to supply 13% of Kenya's electricity, was built by a consortium led by the UK-based Aldwych. Investors included Netherlands-based KPMG Africa, the Norwegian Investment Fund for Developing Countries, Norfund, and even Google. But the transmission line needed to carry electricity from the remote region to a substation 430 kilometers to the south has not been completed after a protracted dispute with the Spanish company installing it. One investor called it a fiasco, but they're saying that other examples, roads in Nairobi flooded and then erupted into potholes. People have questioned the quality and value for money of the $3.3 billion Chinese-built standard gauge railway from Mombasa to Nairobi. Engineers say that Ethiopia built a similar railway at a significantly lower cost per kilometre. Patrick Gathara, a political commentator, called the project, with a nod to an article in The Economist, a third-rate railway for a first-rate price. One foreign investor said a common theme in conversations with ministers is that the government no longer has the money to splash around on big projects, but still has the land, the ambition, and the instruments of state to make things happen. Then, inside Kenya's ambitious devolution project, this is about the devolution, how giving power to local policymakers has helped reshape the rural economy. He's focused in on Governor Kibutha Kibwana, who really is the outlier amongst the governors. In Makueni, he built a fruit processing plant. The plant would not have been built without devolution. Previously, there was money at the centre of Nairobian officials that would make decisions about projects in far-flung areas of the country, but most of them failed. In Makueni, Kibwana decided to build a fruit processing plant after realizing that many of the 12,000 mango farmers in his county were struggling to earn a decent living because of a lack of a local buyer. They used to earn 3 US cents a kilo or even less, but now we're paying them 15 US cents a kilo. The plant currently produces only pulp, but by the end of the year, with help from the EU, management plans to install juice-making machinery. And then talking about other counties who are trying to follow suit. Mandera has attracted Phillips. In the past 5 years, the maternal mortality rate has fallen from 3,785 per 100,000 to 588, so that's a big success. And then only 18 of the 47 county governors succeeded in increasing their revenues last year, and only 22 were re-elected in the 2017 elections. Makueni was just one of the 30 county councillors, was re-elected. Many people ran for office in 2013 for the wrong reasons. They thought it's my time to eat, Mr. Kibwana says. But devolution has humanized government and people got found out, and I think that's a powerful statement. I really think he's an outlier. Then there's another article about how Kenya needs to look to global pension funds in its housing drive. This is an interview with Monica Juma, talking about the president's plan to build 500,000 low-cost homes. I said, look, US-based pension funds were among the prominent buyers of Kenya's 10 and 30-year Eurobonds issued earlier this year. And I think investing in affordable housing should be a no-brainer for international pension funds if the yield and the investment vehicle are suitable. Engagement, trust, and other tips for investing in Kenya. This is an interview with Juliana Rotich, a very articulate lady who now runs the BASF office, and she says, share your expertise, engage with authorities, take advantage of decentralization, think regionally as well as nationally, and do not expect lower standards. Hospitality trade thrives on Kenya's plains, if not up the coast. This is what I've been saying for a while, saying the Conservancy model, which took off about a decade ago, is part of a wider effort to spread the profits of tourism. According to a report from the World Travel and Tourism Council, tourism and travel contributed 3.7% to GDP in 2016, although this probably underestimates the wider benefits. Najib Balala, the tourism minister, said in a recent speech that the sector took in record receipts of $1.2 billion in 2017, providing employment directly or indirectly to 1.1 million people. We are targeting 3 million jobs by 2027, he said. Bed nights, he added, went up from 3.5 million to 4 million in 2017. The tourism ministry is focused on 3 main areas: high-end safaris, mass market coastal tourism, and a push into the so-called MICE segment of meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. Benefiting from excellent lodges, efficient internal flight network, as well as visa on arrival scheme, talking about Kenya Airways. But the coastal offering, on the other hand, Mr. Balala concedes, has become tired. And I think he's right. Although we have some fabulous beaches, I think that coastal product has got to be reinvented. Thank you for stopping by.